Now as we just kind of take a moment, and really it's about connection. And just sitting back in our chairs and just relaxing. Often we suggest just taking a deep breath in and just letting it go. And then maybe take another deep breath in and just letting it go. Just telling your mind to relax. Thank it for bringing you here. It's been a lot to do this morning. There's been a lot of stuff going on. And just thank your mind, though, and just say, you know, for the next couple of minutes, I just want to relax. And thank it. It does an amazing job. And then in terms of your body, just think about where your body is holding any stress, where it feels tense, where you can just feel it. And then when you feel that, maybe take another deep breath in and just imagine it just being blown out. Just tell your body to relax. It's done an amazing job. And thank your body. And just now we relax. And we just feel that connection. We feel spirit filling this room, welcoming it, thanking it, understanding that together we are the ones that welcome spirit here. And together we thank it. And we just relax into it. And let it in. It knows what to do. And deep down inside, so do you. It's just to receive. And maybe in your mind, just say, I receive. I receive whatever it is you have for me. Your love, your guidance, direction. Whatever it may be, I surrender to this moment. And I trust. You know exactly what you're doing. Because it's a part of who and what you are. Even when we forget. The truth is we never forget. Maybe there's a message for you. Maybe not. Just trust this moment to take you exactly where you need to go. And in this moment, just imagine there's one thought that wants to be shared with you. What would it be? What would it sound like? What would it look like? What would it smell like or taste like? What is it? Just be open to that experience. And then just take a moment to thank Spirit for these few moments this morning that we got to spend together. And in your own way, just acknowledge it. Acknowledge it in you. Acknowledge it in being here in this moment, right here, right now. And then slowly start to come back into this room, back into your chair. Maybe wiggle your fingers and wiggle your toes. Slowly begin to open your eyes. And when you're ready to, welcome back. It's so funny to be up there. Every single time I do that, there's just this thing that happens where I just imagine this massive light coming into this center and just filling everybody up. And it's just so powerful that sometimes when I get done with it, I'm just standing up here and I always say this. It's like, whoa, it's amazing. Anyways, good morning, everybody. Good morning. So it's Valentine's week. Is everybody ready for that? Speaking of Valentine's week, there's a couple that have been going out for a while and they decided to go out and have dinner. So they're sitting at dinner and dinner is just perfect. The restaurant is so good, the food's so good, the drink's so good. It's just a really, really special moment. And all of a sudden, the guy looks at his partner and he says, you know, this is just a really incredible moment and I just wanted to share something with you. And he says, you know, I understand that I don't have all the money maybe that Jack has. And you know what, I understand that maybe I don't have all the mansion that Russell lives in. I mean, that's a pretty impressive mansion he lives in. And he said, and you know, I don't have the 2019 Porsche that Ray has. But I just want you to know this, that I love you and I would love to marry you. And his partner looks back at him and says, oh, honey, I love you too. But what year was that Porsche that Ray had? Anyways, welcome. So this month is a talk on forgiveness. And we started the conversation last week, and Well, first of all, I want to talk about the name of the talk, because I know I had a few people that have asked me, what on God's green earth is Bozo's on the Bus? What is that all about? So the reason I called it Bozo's on the Bus was because back in the late 60s, actually, there was a comedy group, and they wrote this little skit called Bozo's on the Bus. And what the main guy said was that basically we're all bozos on the bus, and so we might as well sit back and enjoy the ride. And we talk about forgiveness. What we're talking about today is this idea of forgiving others. And when you really think about it, when you come from that spirit or understanding, the truth is, no matter what we think everybody else should be doing, and some of us really know that we're right, that the truth is we're all trying to figure it out the best that we can. We really are. In our own way, regardless of what that looks like, we're all trying to figure it out. And so that's where the term Bozo's on the Bus, and I'm just going to read this because I thought it was beautiful. We are all bozos on the bus, contrary to the self-assured image we work so hard to present to each other on a daily basis. We are all half-baked experiments, mistake-prone beings, born without an instruction book into a very complex world. None of us are models of perfect behavior. We have all betrayed and been betrayed. We've been known to be egotistical, unreliable, lethargic, and stingy. And each one of us has at times awakened in the middle of the night, worrying about everything from money to kids to terrorism to wrinkled skin and receding hairlines. In other words, we really all are just bozos on the bus. And I just thought that was so appropriate given what we're talking about. So I wanted to kind of sit down with you, and this is kind of more of a conversation than it is me up here talking, and just talk a little bit about do a quick review for last week on the things that we talked about to get everybody else up to speed. So when we talk about forgiveness, well, the way I define forgiveness is one of the most powerful tools to bring us back into alignment with our divinity. One of the most powerful tools to bring us back into alignment with our divinity. We talked about the two gifts of freedom, the gift of healing, or gifts of forgiveness, the gift of healing and the gift of freedom. So when we participate in forgiveness, what do we get back? Healing and freedom. Doesn't sound like too bad of a deal, right? How many times should we forgive? We kiddingly said when Jesus was talking with Paul and he was talking about the Romans, how many times do we forgive? 7 times 70. So does that mean we forgive 490 times? No. I just love this, so. So forgive because it's easier than math, right? I loved it when I saw that. So when we talk about forgiveness, metaphysically, what it means is to give up the false. What's that have to do with it? And when I thought about it, we talked about this last week. What are we giving up when we forgive? Shame, blame, anger, rage, attack, hate. Just to name a few. There's others, but that's a good start. Those are the things that we're giving up. And all right, now I'm going to test you guys. And what do you get when you let go of all of that? Ta-da, you guys pass. Nice job. You get peace. You get peace. That's it. You get peace. That's not too bad. So then we talked about what forgiveness doesn't mean, right? And we talked about this thought that when we forgive, then we have to do all of these things. That just isn't part of the equation. It's just not. For example, well, if we forgive, then I guess there doesn't have to be any accountability. Wrong. When I forgive, then we should forget. Wrong. When I forgive, then we have to participate in something that we don't want to participate in. Wrong. Not at all. When I forgive, then do I got to become best friends with this person? No. Do I have to be a doormat? No. None of that. You know, and as I was reviewing this for the talk today, I came across something I want to share with you because I thought it put it so beautifully. Book of Freedom, Paul Selig, love Paul Selig. And was asked a question. Talking about, but I'd like to ask a question about the difference in vibration because we all are operating at different octaves depending on our choices. And if you have a family member that you recognize that they're choosing, for example, alcoholism, and that affects you. I never feel better, but I also don't like what they're choosing, and I don't like the way I feel around this person. So it's tricky. It's a tricky road to walk to protect yourself and not feel superior, but also to understand that you're operating at a different level. So that's the question, and here's the response. No, you're not. No, you're not. In fact, you think you are, and you're actually above the other only in your idealization of your own behavior. You're not above them, and they're not below you. They're having a different encounter with themselves and perhaps learning through it, and perhaps giving you the opportunity to learn as well. If you assume that someone is not where they're supposed to be, you've decided for them based upon what you think they should be, or perhaps where or how they should behave based upon your idealization of behavior. Now, if someone's being harmful to themselves, you may offer them help. You may support them or not. You may distance yourself from them if you wish, if that is the best give that you can give yourself and them. This does not make them wrong. Do you understand this? It doesn't make you wrong either, but it certainly doesn't make you right. The idealization, I am healthy, I'm the healthy one, and they are not so healthy, has implicit separation inviting itself in the announcement. If you can understand that everyone has come here to learn, how they learn their lessons is in some way decided by them at a higher level. You learn not to judge. You learn not to judge. You don't have to enable. You don't have to agree. You don't have to drink with them. You don't have to give them money to buy booze. Do you understand this? You can say, thank you, no. You can do that. And in some cases, what they're learning through will be what brings them to the light, and no other way could be found. Wow. Wow. So in other words, we're all just trying to figure it out. No one's above or below. And the minute I try to decide for somebody that they're not, quote unquote, doing it right, is the minute that I cause separation. Because I, for some reason, have taken a higher ground or decided to stand on a higher ground than them. And that's really what it's about. So when we talked about last week with forgiveness, and we talked about forgiveness for what? Traditionally, we just reviewed this, that it was sin. We also talked about the difference between the way Unity sees it, because they represent it. They talk about it metaphysically, and what that means is a departure from the law of our being. That's what metaphysically sin means. It's a departure from the law of your being. And then, well, if we do that, then how do we fix it? How do we correct it? Well, we repent. Those words just like, ugh, right? But we repent. But metaphysically, what does repentance mean? To make a reversal of mind and heart into the direction of the divine. Wow. Wow. So let me get this right. I kind of got off track for a little bit. Yep. And now all I do is kind of get back on track, right? Yeah. Yeah. A little bit of a different feeling, a little bit of a different vibe than what we've heard traditionally. Yeah? Yeah. I think so, just a little bit. Cool. Then we talked about the process, so we just said that ultimately that's what it's about. It's just acknowledging the fact that you got off track a little bit and that you just want to get back into the direction of the divine, right? Then we spent some time talking about, okay, well, let's talk about it. We mentioned a couple of things. Number one, it's not always easy. We spent quite a bit of time with this idea that if you're not brought up in an environment where forgiveness is easily given and received, then it's probably not real easy to give and receive, period. I don't know what kind of environment you were brought up in, but I wasn't brought up in a very forgiving and receiving forgiveness thing. That it's a skill, that it's something to be practiced. That's why Jesus said 7 times 70. That's why Charles Fillmore said, how much? A half an hour every single day. Every day is what Fillmore said. So you guys had a homework assignment. For those of you that weren't here, I'll forgive it this one time. So my question is, how'd you do? Because the assignment was, start making a list of the times when you find yourself struggling to forgive yourself, because what I know, especially doing what I do for a living, that forgiving yourself usually is one of the hardest things to forgive. The hardest thing to do. So my question is, how'd we do? Any volunteers? Volunteers? I got some pretty goods. Could we have... Not real, Jim said not real good, so can you, the mic? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it wasn't real good this week. Looking back at some of the issues that I've had in my past, I still need a lot of help to get through all this.
Yeah.
And I'm working on it, but it's real hard.
Yeah.
Real painful.
Yeah. Well, thank you for, number one, sharing and being vulnerable enough to share that with us, Jim. Thank you. How many people found it difficult that practiced, that tried it? Yeah. Yeah. It's not the easiest thing to be doing. Anybody else want to share? Anybody?
So I found it interesting as the week went on, the same things were coming up, and then it was allowing me to pay attention to those and just really not beat myself up as much. So it was working. It was, churning, and then I could just say, well, why do you do that to yourself? Why not have a different way of seeing this? And so it was beneficial for me.
Yeah, and I just want to, number one, thank you for sharing with us. One of the things that we have inside of us is this beautiful little thing, and again, depending on how you were brought up, is this thing called the inner critic. And the inner critic is alive and well. And usually what will happen is, the observation is that something will happen, and then all of a sudden we get triggered, and fires off this inner critic that just starts going. How many people have had that experience? Yeah. Pretty much everybody. Yeah, of course that's what happens. So the inner critic gets going, it fires it up, and then it just starts going. And one of the things that we're going to talk about is this idea of how just becoming aware, just awareness. You said it. And that's why, honestly, I just wanted you guys to do and start making a list of what are the things that you struggle with forgiving yourself for? Because I guarantee you that that's a pattern. It's a pattern that you've developed and probably had for a really long time. And ultimately what we have to do, if your choice is to correct that, and if your choice is to forgive yourself, and if your choice is peace, is to become aware of that pattern. And that's why I just wanted you to just start noticing when you can't or you're struggling to forgive yourself, because just understand it's a pattern. That's it. Just start real simple. Okay, wow, check it out. There I go again. Well, what happened there? Well, I don't know. Next thing I know, I got a stack of bills. I'm looking at the bills, and then I'm getting mad at myself because, I just don't ever do this money thing very good. It's just an observation. You just start paying attention, right? You just start, awareness. Start to bring awareness. Remember, we can't heal anything until we bring it into the light. You cannot heal anything. I don't care how many times you pray to God, please heal me, until you acknowledge something is within you, it cannot be healed. Cannot be healed. And so just becoming aware of it. There's no right, there's no wrong, there's no judgment here. It's just, wow, I'm just aware that when this happens, then I get triggered, and then my inner critic fires up and just starts going crazy. Good enough. Good first step. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, cool. Cool. Well, thank you for sharing. I saw this and laughed. Honestly, when it comes to forgiving ourselves, what my observation has been so many times, one of the biggest things when it comes to forgiving ourselves, it's about the past. Think about it for a minute when you talk about forgiving yourself. If you could just totally take that thing called the past, right? Get rid of it. What would you have to forgive yourself about? Pretty much nothing. Pretty much nothing. So the next thing that I wanted to get into is the talk for today. So that's kind of like a little bit of a recap of what we talked about last week. So everybody who wasn't here, you're caught up. Awesome. And so now what we're going to do is spend a little bit of time talking about forgiving others. And just understand when we talk about forgiving others, we're not just talking about a person. Oh no. There's way more when we talk about others. We also talk about maybe groups or organizations. Anybody got a little bit of irritated with some organizations or groups? Yeah, I think everybody's hand is going up pretty much, right? God knows politics would never come up in that conversation. No. Right? Society. Sometimes we look at society and go, what are we doing? What's going on here? This is crazy what we're doing. Events, sometimes things that'll happen that we look at and we just can't wrap our mind around how do we forgive something like that. The Holocaust might be something that people look at and say, I don't know if I could ever forgive something like that. I get it, right? Those are a handful of the things that I thought about, and then I was just driving here this morning, I was like, oh my God, one of the biggest ones. How many people, and it may surprise you to hear me say this, how many people actually ever had to stop and forgive God? I did, because I thought for a minute that this thing that I really have spent my entire life trying to figure out left me. Yeah. And so that was part of my process, and I think it's really a good discussion to have, just because that's part of my human experience. And if it's happening for me, I would imagine there may be one or two other people in here that may have happened to as well. Is there anything else that you guys can think of when it comes to forgiveness, and we're thinking outside of ourselves, what we need to forgive when it comes to forgiveness? Any thoughts? Any ideas? I know there's more out there. Bullying. Okay, thanks, Jim. Bullying. Yeah, that's great. Forgive that. Yeah. Anything else? Social justice. Perfect. Great. Good. The weather. Oh, that's beautiful. That's perfect. Yeah. The weatherman. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Awesome. Anyways, so there's a handful of things that we can look at. The point of this is just to share with you is there's more than just a person when we talk about forgiving, when we're thinking about our forgiveness things. I want to take a minute and talk about, when we think about forgiveness, the secret. Because I think this is really, really, really important, that when we talk about forgiveness, the secret is, you understand, when you forgive, it's got nothing to do with whatever it is you're forgiving. It's got nothing to do with whatever it is. It's got nothing to do with that. I'm not saying that if you forgive someone or you forgive an event or you forgive whatever the circumstances are, that other person, place, or thing may not be forgiven and may not experience something as a result of you forgiving them, but ultimately, it's not about them. Again, what are we trying to do when we decide to forgive? What are we going for? Peace. So it's about us. That's what forgiveness is. It's about us. I really believe that the ultimate example is when Jesus is on the cross. He's about to make his transition. He's standing there. He looks down, and what are the Romans doing? They got all his clothes. And they're basically deciding who's going to get them. They're gambling to determine who's going to get his clothes. And he looks at him and he says, hey, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. And I really believe that Jesus ultimately knew that the truth was it had nothing to do with them. It had nothing to do with them. It was about him staying in alignment with his divinity, and he knew if he went into judgment, he was going to pull himself out of that experience. And so he forgave. And that's why I did it. So when we talk about forgiveness, I just wanted to spend a few moments and get some thoughts. Because, like I mentioned last week, forgiveness is so much fun, right? So if I sat there and talked to each and every one of you and had a little bit of a conversation, we talked about forgiveness, what would happen is I would get 50 different answers or 100 different answers. Well, how do we do this thing called forgiveness? Don't know. So I just want to open it up for a half a second and say, for anybody that wants to share, how do you forgive? How do you do it? Okay, so she wants to acknowledge her upset. Got it, thank you. I love that. How else do we forgive? Let go, which is great. Ray, I got this. You're good. I got it. As long as I can hear it, I can repeat it. It'll catch it on the recording. Thank you. Let go. Thank you, Jim. How else do we forgive? Beautiful. See the other person as a child of God. Not always easy, but yes. Don't invest emotionally in what they do. Yeah. I call that playing their game, buying their story, engaging with them. Yeah, thank you. Did you say something? No. Okay, just talking. Awesome. Cool. So what does it look like? So now you've made this grand decision that I'm going to forgive. It kind of goes along the same way, but what does it actually look like? What do you do? Do you sit down? Do you pray? Do you meditate? Do you go for a walk? What do you do? Relax. Got it. You relax. Cool. Take inventory. Cool. Like that. Yeah. So there's a couple different ways, and I love everybody is just going, and I'm just telling you guys, it's so true, because we all have this thing when it comes to forgiveness. It's like, well, I know that it's really important, but does that mean I really am supposed to be doing it? Right? And it's like, yes, it's one of the foundational pieces to keeping yourself aligned to your divinity. Yes. Yes. Right? Here's a question. How do you know if you're doing it right or wrong? Wait a minute, I can do this right or wrong? Actually, I think you can. And when I say wrong, I don't mean necessarily that the way that you're trying to process it or the way that you're trying to understand it is necessarily wrong. To me, as long as you make some type of an effort, that's probably a good start. But ultimately, believe it or not, there is a way to know if you're doing it right or wrong. And I want you to think about something. Think about something you've been trying to forgive, a person, place, thing, circumstance, whatever, for a long time. And yet, when you think about that, there's still something there. There's still something there. That is where you can tell what's going on. That's where you can tell, did I do enough work with this forgiveness thing? Did I do enough? Because sometimes just to say I forgive you one time, I'm just being real here, guys, it's not necessarily enough. It's not. If you try to forgive somebody, person, place, thing, circumstance, and you're really struggling and having emotional upset, it still makes you mad, it still pisses you off, it still frustrates you, then what I'm telling you is there's more work that needs to be done. Did he just say that forgiveness takes work? Yes. Yeah, I did. Forgiveness takes work sometimes. Depends on what it is. But sometimes it takes work and you just have to do more. Spend more time doing it. And then you ask yourself the question, could there be something that's missing? Man, I've been trying to forgive this person for the past 20 years of my life. I just cannot let this go. Could there be something missing? I would say probably, yeah. Right. And Ray said something that is so true, because my belief is that there's things that show up in our lives to show us some certain things, to teach us lessons at times. And like I said last week, sometimes we need some time to take place before we can see that lesson. So sometimes it's just a matter of time. I can't do it right now. It's too painful. That's okay. That's all right. You don't have to right in that moment. And rightfully so, because you've got to go through a healing process, right? And it may take a minute for you to turn around and look back at it and go, okay, now I'm ready. Now I'm ready to forgive, right? I want to talk for a minute about the forgiveness mindset, because I think it's really, really important to understand this. One of the things from a coaching perspective that I can share with you is there's things that we have that are going on that when we make a decision, in this case, we make a decision to forgive somebody, that's a great start. But if underneath that thought, we have this thought or idea about forgiveness, and that would be my question to you. What do you think about forgiveness? Forget the specific thing that you're trying to forgive, but what do you think about forgiveness in general? That's called your forgiveness mindset. What do you think about forgiveness? What do you mean, what do you think about forgiveness? Well, I don't know. Is it easy or is it hard? You're the one making that decision. You're the one that's telling yourself, is it easy to forgive or is it hard to forgive? You're the one that's making that decision, right? Are you good at it or are you bad at it? You've made these decisions and they're controlling everything that you're trying to do when it comes to forgiveness, right? Are some people and things easier to forgive than others? Yeah, could be. Could be. Just remember, though, it's your mindset about forgiveness. That's the thing, is just understanding where is your mindset when it just comes to the thought of forgiving. Here's a thought. Have you ever given yourself permission to be forgiven or to give forgiveness? Have you ever given yourself permission to do that? What an interesting thought. Giving yourself permission. What a concept. Right? And the last thing I thought about is, do you want to? You'd be amazed, and there's no judgment coming from me in terms of people when it comes to forgiveness. Some people just don't want to forgive. They don't. So you ask yourself these questions. In my opinion, those are the things that need to be addressed before you start off on your forgiveness. So when we talked about was it easy or hard, I knew that when I asked you to forgive yourself first, that it was going to be the toughest thing that you could do. I did it very intentionally. I didn't start with somebody else, which, depending on who you study, will say, well, start outside of yourself first, because going inside is going to be a little bit difficult. I started there first. Why? Because if you did the work or you take some time and think about it, it was probably the hardest thing that you could do. And so I intentionally did that because I wanted to see where your mind was, what your forgiveness mindset was. And if you go through that exercise, you'll figure it out real quick. You'll figure it out real quick. Where do I struggle with it? What am I having a hard time with? What is it that really hits me? Right? How do you know if you're ready to forgive yourself or forgive others? How do you know? It's real simple. I already said it. when you decide peace is more important than anything else. Last week I spent time talking about being right or being happy. There is a big difference between being right and being happy. How do you know when you're ready to forgive? When you just say, you know what, I'm done. I don't want this anymore. It hurts too much. There's too much pain there. That's how you know when you're ready. So I'm going to share with you some thoughts, some ideas. I've been very fortunate enough in terms of my journey, in terms of my studies. I've had a lot of opportunities to see a lot of different ways that we can do this. And so it's kind of, if you will, I'm pulling from a few different places. I'll share some of those resources with you when we're done. But in general, here's what I've noticed about forgiveness and what I'm suggesting. And by the way, in your handout, you don't have to worry about remembering this because you should have all gotten a piece of paper with these steps on there. So, the first thing is just a simple acceptance. This happened. Whatever it is, just an acknowledgement. You're not denying it. You're not fighting it. You're not doing anything. You're not saying other than this is what happened. Got it. Some people struggle just to do that. No, that didn't really happen. Well, until you can admit that that's what really happened, you're probably going to have a hard time letting go of it and forgiving it. The second thing, and this is so critically important, express how you feel. Don't deny that you're upset. Don't deny that you're struggling. Don't deny whatever is real for you in terms of what happened. Express it. I suggest writing it down. Literally, this is how I feel. God, that hurt. That was horrible. When that person said this, it just made me feel like they didn't love me anymore. They didn't trust me. When I went to look at my bank account and I bounced some checks, I just felt like such an idiot. Just express what is real and what's going on inside of you. Again, why are we doing this? Until we acknowledge what's going on inside of us, we cannot let it go. Nowhere have I ever read, in every single thing that I've studied, says don't express the way that you feel. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to sit down with whatever it is and have a conversation with them. That's not what I'm talking about. But to acknowledge what's going on inside of yourself. Honor what's going on inside of yourself. Don't deny it. Don't sugarcoat it. Sometimes unity gets a bad rap for walking around with a bunch of happy people walking around with a big smile on their face all the time and acknowledging or for not acknowledging the way that you're feeling. Acknowledging your feelings is a huge part of it. Why? Because it's allowing it to come up to the surface. Eckhart Tolle says, if it went in pain, it's coming out in pain. Do you get that? If it went in with pain, it's coming out in pain. How can you basically have it come out? Just write it down. It's not saying that we have to belabor it and we got to drag this thing on for 30 years. Nowhere does it say that healing needs to take a long time. Nowhere. It doesn't. But there's got to be an acknowledgement of what's going on inside of you. And so if we can acknowledge it, even if you just write it down on paper and let it rip. If it takes 10 pages, let the 10 pages go, but be real about it. Be real about it. And then we forgive. It's really simple. I forgive this person, this place, this thing, this circumstance. We literally say, I forgive you. That's where our part comes in. The next part, engage the divine. What? Yeah, engage the divine. What do I mean by that? Here's what it sounds like for me. The best way for me to do this, just show this to you. So if I'm going through a forgiveness process and I sit down and I've got something I'm working on, it's going to sound like something like this. Hey, God, I'm really wanting to forgive this person. And what I'm noticing is that I'm really, really struggling, and it really hurts, and it's really painful, and I'm not really sure what to do at this point in time with this thing, but I'm not having a lot of fun with it. But I am willing to forgive because I know ultimately what I want is peace, and I know ultimately that you'll help me let this go. That's the way Mike does it. Sounds something like that. It doesn't matter how you do it, but don't forget who and what you are. You are divine. Engage with the divine when you go through the process of forgiveness because it's there. It's a part of who and what you are, and it will help if you engage in it. Sometimes we think we got to do all this stuff on our own. Wrong answer. Wrong answer. It's not doing it on our own, right? And then finally, after we engage the divine, it's more or less release it and let it go. And then just pay attention. And if you're hanging out and a week later or 2 weeks later it comes back again, guess what? Wash, rinse, repeat. Right? Wash, rinse, and repeat. So here's a couple things that I study that I find incredibly helpful. I know there's a lot of people here that are in the Course in Miracles. That's a beautiful course on forgiveness. How many people know Byron Katie? Loving What Is? Beautiful work. Just absolutely really beautiful work. I got to be honest, and I was just exposed to this recently within the last 6 months, and it is really my favorite now, all times when it comes to forgiveness. Radical forgiveness. Really what radical forgiveness does is it takes the Course in Miracles and puts it into a formula that you can use, and it's powerful because you're basically acknowledging that you're part of this, whatever's going on, and you're really just going like, yeah, this showed up for something for me to learn, and I'm ready to let that go and be healed. It's beautiful, 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 beautiful work. So, for this month, what are we going to do? We're going to keep working on this idea of, okay, we're going to make a list. What am I having a hard time forgiving myself for? Yep. What am I going to do is I'm going to pay attention to when I'm struggling to forgive others, right? And then we're going to keep working on that. And then in a couple weeks, we're going to get together and have a great big forgiveness ceremony the last Sunday of this month. And I'm just going to ask and encourage you, if that feels good to you, awesome. If you know anybody else that you feel like could maybe use a little bit of help with that, bring them. Bring them. We are going to blow the roof off of this place. We got a lot of healing to do in this community. We do. We have to do it here first, though. And then we start taking that out into the community and share that with everybody else. So, your homework assignment, should you choose to accept it, is to go forward, start making a list. If you can use the practice and that helps you, great. I've listed some other resources which I think are fantastic. Remember, though, really what it comes down to, guys, is that we're all bozos on the bus. We're all trying to figure this thing out. Every single one of us is doing the best that we can. We're all divine beings. It's just that at certain points in times, we forget. And it's my hope and prayer that as you walk through those doors, that if it's just for a moment during the week, this time right here and right now, that we remind you. That's what we do here. That's what this family does. We remind each other who and what we are, which is your divine. That is your true nature. Don't ever forget that. You guys are beautiful. Thanks for coming.